Good afternoon. Welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. Happy to have you whether you're a first-time viewer or returning viewer. I appreciate your support. Welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. I'm an 18-year criminal defense attorney who has practiced in the area of criminal law for quite some time. And what you can expect from me is honest legal analysis where it provides itself. And also you can expect respect for the victims without sensationalism and fear-mongering and all that other fun stuff. So today we're talking about just Gypsy Rose Blanchard, abuse, mens rea, and the limits of criminal law. There are some cases where people immediately pick a side. And then there are cases that make people uncomfortable because they don't fit neatly into our moral categories. The case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard is one of those. Because when you look closely, this isn't just a true crime story. It's a case about how the law handles prolonged abuse, how responsibility is assigned, and what happens when survival strategies collide with criminal statutes. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was raised under extreme control by her mother, Dee Blanchard. For years, Gypsy was subjected to unnecessary medical treatments, portrayed as seriously ill and disabled, isolated from her peers, denied normal developmental autonomy. Medical professionals later described this as a clear case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, now referred to as factitious disorder imposed on another. Legally, this matters because abuse wasn't incidental. It was systemic, sustained, and documented. For those of you that have seen the documentary, you see the cabinet full of prescription drugs. You see her being in a wheelchair. You see her being under the direct control of her mother. Let's talk about autonomy and coercive control, where law starts to strain. One of the hardest things for the legal system to assess is coercive control. Gypsy was not locked in a basement. She wasn't chained. Outwardly, she appeared compliant. But legally speaking, control does not require physical restraint. If you think about it, it's similar to a statutory rape situation. I'm not saying that this was a statutory rape situation, but essentially it's not a scenario where there is chains or binding, but there is coercive control due to the status of the parties. And the mother, Dee, exhibited a strong, manipulative, controlling control over her daughter, where she gave her medicine that she likely didn't need, where she watched her every move, kept her controlled. There is an uneven power dynamic between Gypsy and her mother. That's why I mentioned the analogous situation of statutory rape, for instance. There's a person who is older, who is exerting control over someone who is not of the legal appropriate age, being taken advantage of. That's the example that I'm currently seeing. And again, not saying that Dee did commit sexual abuse or anything like that. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just giving you the example of where it's important to look at control that is unbalanced. And that's why the law often steps in those cases. So control can be psychological. Probably most likely was. Could be medical, which is in Gypsy's case. Could be emotional. Why would you want to do this to your mother? Your mother is taking care of you. Your mother is giving you everything you need. And outwardly, I'm sure that the mother appeared as a well-meaning mother until you start kind of peeling back the layers. And also reinforced through fear and dependency. And over time, coercive control fundamentally alters decision-making capacity. That's not an excuse, it's context. And context is something criminal law often struggles to integrate. The crime and why it's legally unavoidable. Eventually, Gypsy participated in planning the killing of her mother with her boyfriend, Nicholas Godjon. This is where the law becomes very firm. From a criminal standpoint, there was planning, there was communication, there was coordination. Those facts support intent or mens rea. They knew what they were going to do, and it was premeditated. It wasn't a scenario where it was self-defense. It wasn't a scenario where they were acting under an extreme emotional disturbance at some point. Everything seemed to be pretty planned. And intent, like I said, mens rea, is a cornerstone of criminal liability. This is where many people want the law to bend. But the law doesn't ask, was this understandable? It asks, was that intentional? And I think you have to look at it and understand that, yes, it was intentional. And that distinction is critical, which provides the basis for mens rea, or a guilty mind, guilty conscience. Why self-defense doesn't fit. This is an important legal point. A lot of public debate centers on the idea of self-defense. Legally, self-defense requires an imminent threat. So ultimately, there has to be some sort of thing that makes her think that her mom is going to kill her. And in some ways, you could argue she's giving her medicine that she doesn't need. She's making her get in a wheelchair and ask for fundraising efforts and do all those things. Not that asking for fundraising efforts is abuse, but ultimately, you think about some of the treatments that she had that she didn't need, could have impaired her life, could have potentially harmed her immensely. So we have to think about that. A proportional response. Some people argue that maybe Gypsy could have ran away. But the thing is, we don't fully know the dynamics between Dee Dee and Gypsy. Was Dee Dee dangerous? In some ways, maybe she was. She clearly had some sort of mental illness with Munchausen by proxy. But what was she willing to do? And that's something that we don't know. And then there's no reasonable alternative. And so you think about it, could Gypsy have just left with her boyfriend and not murdered her mother or participated in murdering her mother? So in Gypsy's case, the abuse was real, but not legally imminent at the moment of the killing. That doesn't make the situation humane, but it does make the defense legally unavailable, the self-defense. This is one of the most painful disconnects between moral intuition and legal doctrine. Sentencing, where the system did flex. Here's where nuance comes back in. Gypsy ultimately received a plea deal, resulting in a significantly reduced sentence compared to what first-degree murder might carry. That tells us something important. While the law couldn't excuse the act, it could contextualize it. Sentencing is often where justice quietly acknowledges complexity, even when statutes cannot. For instance, when you're being sentenced after you've been found guilty, there are mitigating factors. For instance, if you plead guilty, if you admit your wrongdoing, there are certain numbers of those factors that are in your favor. Aggravating factors are the fact that, maybe the brutality of your crime, maybe the fact that you ran, maybe the fact that you lied, maybe the fact that it was premeditated. All of these things can potentially be aggravators. But I would think that the part of the mitigator was the fact that she had been drugged, essentially, with prescription drugs that were not what she needed. So why this case divides people? This case divides people because it exposes a truth that we don't like to confront. The law is designed to punish acts, not to fully repair lives shaped by abuse. People want a verdict that feels morally satisfying. But the legal system isn't built for moral catharsis. It's built for structure, consistency, and restraint. And oftentimes the legal system comes from a place of punishment rather than rehabilitation. So in closing, Gypsy Rose Blanchard's case forces us to sit with discomfort because two things can be true at the same time. Severe abuse occurred and a serious crime was committed. Justice here is not clean. And maybe the most honest takeaway is this: the law can acknowledge harm, but it can't always heal it. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that you will tune in again to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. I'm Buffy, and thank you for tuning in. It means a lot to me. Have a great day. Bye-bye.